and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over some of the week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility space. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. We have one rule: we appreciate vigorous debate, but let's all be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Even if it sounds like investment advice, it isn't. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on Clubhouse, LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li, and I'm the Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Hey all. Good evening from my side. My name is Lei, and I am the former chief editor of China Auto Review, which published newsletters and the only tabloid magazine in English focused exclusively on the Chinese auto market. I've spent pretty much the last 20 years on the ground in China covering the industry. I'm now in the US as an independent analyst consultant and still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. This is episode 24, and this week we're talking last Saturday, XPeng announced the pre-sale pricing of the P5. And then I think the industry got somewhat quiet for a few days. And all of a sudden, this rainstorm in Zhengzhou, in Henan province, took over the news, right? The headline.
It's tragic.
And the last couple of days was very active. We heard about Mercedes 10 days after Volkswagen announced their 2030 strategy. Volvo Cars, became, I guess, aside from Tesla, the only non-Chinese automaker to control operations in China. Faraday Future, after all these years, finally got listed on NASDAQ today. And NIO ES8 set sail for Norway. So let's talk about the P5. I think this was one of the most talked about models in the Chinese market this year.
Highly anticipated.
Yeah, highly anticipated. Probably for the sole reason that it claims to be the first smart EV, mass-produced smart EV with LiDAR, and two LiDARs for that matter. And so,
it was supposed to get pricing at the Shanghai Auto Show.
Right. So quite a few episodes ago, we talked about this on our Shanghai Auto Show recap. And it's been 3 months since they, unveiled the model. So I thought this was a bit of even, with the announcement of this 160,000 to 230 RMB pricing, I think there's still a bit of mystery surrounding the model and especially the pricing, right? We don't have the breakdown. There are 6 different variants available to order.
Which is a lot.
Yeah. Well, we can debate on that, but there's the G versions, there's the E versions, and there are the P versions. Basically, it's XPeng, so they're designating their models with the PENG, basically to denote different versions. So for the G, it's like the entry level. There's nothing, right? by smart EV standards, there's nothing. And then there's the E version, which has the XPeng 3.0 X-Pilot, which offers expressway NGP. And the top of the line models with the P, which offer the 2 LiDARs and has X-Pilot 3.5, offers both the expressway NGP and local urban NGP. So that's basically, the breakdown.
And the numbers denote the range of the vehicle. So 600p means that it's the highest end with the 2 LiDAR that is estimated at a 600 kilometer range.
Right. Worth noting to the 460 is the LFP, while the two higher ones are the NMC cell chemistries. So what do you think? I mean, this price range, I think we don't have the breakdown of each of the 6 variants. I think they're still keeping it a mystery.
So on paper, the complexity of manufacturing seems to be not so much, right? Because we're adding LiDAR to the 2 high-end versions and swapping out battery cells from a range standpoint, but the rest should be software. So from a manufacturing standpoint, it should still be pretty simple. But from wow, that's a lot to digest. And with the P5, because they've taken so long to come out with pricing, that tells me that they did a reassessment. So they did an initial assessment. They came up with pricing for the P5. Prior to the Shanghai Auto Show, there were all these other announcements from vehicle manufacturers about new products and their pricing. And not only that, Tesla also coming back with reduced pricing for the Model 3 and the Model Y. And so it seems with this huge range of 160 to 230, they're trying to be almost everything to everybody with this P5, which is, to me, very, very confusing. Because it'll end up being the 80-20 rule, where people are either going to buy the cheap variant or they're going to buy the higher variant. And when you give people this many choices, I think some people will be discouraged and just want something very simple without having to explain all these different things. You know, it took you 4 minutes to kind of talk through all the different variants. So if I'm a shopper, I just want to understand, you know, how does this compete with the Model 3, the BYD Han, right? Because I think that should probably be a competitor, although Han is a little bit bigger, and other sedans, right? Because now we're talking specifically entry-level sedans, right? So the Model Y is actually not a direct competitor to the P5. That would the Model Y would compete directly with the G3, or the G3. So a bit confusing, and I would have loved for them to have been more decisive and just said, this is what we're doing. But they sharpened their pencil on the product cost or the product price, but it sounds like they're going to be trying to make it up on the service side by adding autonomous or ADAS features as service subscription costs. So
right, and the big caveat is that you still need to pay for the Xpilot 3.0, 3.5 software and upgrades, and those pricing were not announced.
Right.
How much are they? We don't know. And here's my take on the mysteriousness of the pricing, of the nature of the pricing. I think this is probably coming from the fact that there's obviously, whenever you launch a new model, you know, building on the pretty successful P7, right, which is higher priced, you're going to run into a kind of internal debate where you put the pricing. That's in the first place.
Right.
And second point is, with the P5 being the first globally mass-produced smart EV with LiDAR, XPeng wants to set the benchmark, okay? Set the benchmark of, you know, how much you would expect a private purchased EV with LiDAR is going to cost.
Right.
And the issue they've been facing, I think, is the P6, usually, right? You know, P5, obviously, the numbering is supposed to be positioned lower than the P7.
Mm-hmm.
But the P7 doesn't have LiDAR. The P5 is a smaller car. So this is going sort of against convention, right? Usually a higher level model will have more features, will be more expensive. So these are the issues I think that the XPeng is confronting. And also some of the customer feedback, you know, existing P7 customers, you know, when are we going to get, you know, when our P7 is going to be equipped with LiDAR?
Yeah.
So these are the whole bunch of issues that I think they're internally debating, and it probably has taken longer for them to, you know, set the pricing, because I felt this is weird for a startup, for a smart EV startup. Usually it's pretty straightforward. Usually it's very transparent, right? But I guess not on the P5. It seems it's taken a bit longer to set everything.
But let's also spend a couple minutes on the services side, because as you'd mentioned earlier, the subscription services to upgrade to 2.5 or 3.0 or 3.5 X Pilot, they haven't been announced. So if I am a potential P5 buyer, I want to know that before I lock myself into their ecosystem. So that is, to your point earlier, that's actually quite a substantial issue. Now, they're not going to start delivering. They've taken orders for the P5, but they're not going to start delivering for a bit. I think end of the year, right?
Q4.
Yeah. So I'm hesitant. So I would assume that they're going to roll out pricing in the next couple of months in order to firm up those orders, number one. And then if we take a step back, the market, and you and I have followed the automotive sector in China for you, the US for me, since we were little kids. The unprecedented speed because of the availability of software, creating new features as opposed to physical hardware needing to be installed in vehicles. That's why traditionally you would have mid-cycle enhancements. That's why you would have these major upgrades every 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the vehicle type. That's the traditional auto sector. But now it's every 12, every 14 months, Tesla setting the pace. XPeng is trying to set the pace, but I think they're still a little bit hesitant. And to me, it's illustrated pretty obviously with their how long it's taken them to roll out pricing for the P5 and not even figure out the subscription costs yet. Because you would think that they would just, during that announcement, have an out the door price. You want to get the highest level P5, it's going to cost you this, which is still less than a Model 3, blah, right? That would have been pretty impressive. But this is, I believe, what Volkswagen is going through right now with the IDs. You know, they thought 18 months ago, 24 months ago, when they froze the feature set on these vehicles, these EVs that they're building now, they thought they were going to be competitive, but we're seeing the market being pushed by domestic Chinese EV makers that are also trying to make an impact, grab share, and it's really difficult to keep up. And I think XPeng still wants to be the leader and set the pace, but unfortunately their competitors are not cooperating, right?
Yeah, and it's nice to bring Volkswagen into this conversation in regard to the P5, because where the P5 is priced, 160,000 to 230,000, is actually a so-called, that price range is right in the middle of the so-called dumbbell effect that Volkswagen China CEO Stefan Wallenstein talked about. That is totally different than the ICE market, right, where the bulk of the ICE market is in the 80,000 to 250,000 range. Mm-hmm. But in the EV market, some 40%, okay, classic example is the Wuling Honghua Mini EV, are priced below 100,000 RMB. And then on the other side of the dumbbell is these, 100% NEV, pure NEV players, right?
Right.
Even the XPengs, the Neos, the Autos, which are priced above at least 250,000 RMB. So XPeng P5 is obviously trying to set the benchmark in that part of the market where Volkswagen is trying to squeeze into with their ID4s and the latest ID6. Yeah, so, there's a bit of both a internal competition and as well as external competition.
Yeah, and I think I've explained this before. What normally happens is the market research team, along with the marketing team, assesses the market, the next 18 months, next 24 months, what products are coming out, what features each of these products are going to have, and the target price range, the target market, target consumer. And then they go to the engineering team and say, we need, in order for our P5 to be competitive, we need to have X, Y, and Z features, and they need to be priced at this. The engineering team throws up all over it, says either we can't do that at that cost, we're not going to be able to do it on time. And then the business leaders say, you got to make this happen. And then the engineers, they pull in all their resources in order to make these features happen, throw it over to manufacturing, and manufacturing says, we can't do this. And the suppliers can't do this, not at this cost, not at this price. And so, to your point, these are all the internal battles that are happening all the time in the automotive sector and other product related sectors. But in this new era of mobility, features are now software based. So a lot of that software is a make or buy decision, right? Whereas traditionally hardware is mostly buy on the OEM side. But now, do we have the resources? Do we have the expertise in-house to create this new service feature for XPilot 3.5? And guess what? The Chinese EV startups, they have those resources in-house because they're, I think XPeng said 40% of their employees are software developers or engineering people, right? Which means most of those are software developers. Whereas Volkswagen, GM, Mercedes, Toyota, that ratio is much, much smaller from a software engineering standpoint. Now, they have a ton of engineers, but they're not software engineers. And so therein lies the rub for the traditional automakers because they can't make these decisions without pulling in a supplier or pulling in an agency or a third-party software development company, not in the time frame that they need to in order to be have competitive products with the features that need to be on these products. So it would be interesting to be part of some of these meetings to hear about all these different debates that they're having, right?
Yeah. Another issue XPeng, the P5 would have to face is you do have to remember they're using a new kid on the block with a lighter supplier. It's unproven. It's, Levox from DJI, which kind of jumped them out of nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have to prove that this is a stable, reliable, quality product for this model. I mean, a lot of things are at stake, right? At that price point and providing the functionality, the quality, the reliability. So yeah, this is a huge bet, for P5.
I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. When I was at Apple, the iPod Mini came out, and it came out with 5 colors, I think, right? It came out with the silver, the gold, like 4 or 5 colors. And the internal team had forecasted completely wrong on the ratio of colors, right? Because now you need to buy those enclosures in the different colors. So there was a bottleneck because everybody was buying the gold color, and the marketing team had forecasted completely incorrectly and didn't have enough gold enclosures ordered. So this is kind of sort of, to your point, this is a new product, right? They don't know how accurate their forecast is going to be. So it would also be interesting to learn of the 6 variants, which ones they think are going to be their high runners. Because number one, that would indicate to us who they think their competition is. And then number 2, it'll give us an indication of, okay, we need to order 50,000 LiDAR because we're anticipating the 600p being the high runner or the 500p being the high runner. And so I would imagine, and this is a typical automotive sales strategy, is to price very low on the bare bones model to get people's attention. Traditionally, you would get people into the dealership because I priced this car at $25,000 and then have the salesperson come in and over and talk to you and say, you know what, for $30,000, you can get an upgraded battery, XPilot 3.5, 2 LiDAR, because I noticed that you have 2 children, so you want to save your vehicle, right? And so it's pretty typical just upselling. And so the 160 might get eyeballs to the website, and then that's when they try to upsell you. So
yeah, and for the P5, we don't really know how it will perform until at least early part of next year, because it will start deliveries in Q4. We're not going to get meaningful numbers, I doubt. So it won't be until early next year when we see how they perform.
There's going to be a glut of competitors at around the 200,000 RMB price point too. So
oh yeah. So we will see, and so we brought Volkswagen into the conversation. Maybe it's worth a bit of our time to talk about what Mercedes talked about today. And I'll tell you this, I felt a bit of deja vu because it was almost the exact copy of what Volkswagen said 10 days ago. So I'm wondering whether the CEOs, whether, Ola Kalinius and Herbert Diess, they must have talked to each other, oh, you're going to do this, we're going to do this as well. Because
Well, and they've probably been in those meetings together with the German or the EU Commission.
Right, the Fit for 55, which both CEOs said, not surprised. It'll be a challenge, but they're ready, right? So,
Yes.
But the interesting, kind of the fine print. So Volkswagen Group said they'll be all electric in major markets of the world by 2040. And Mercedes said by 2030, all electric where market conditions allow. So these are the new fine prints that you see are very interesting.
Yeah, that's what I call the weasel words, or the asterisk, the big asterisk, right?
Yeah, big asterisk. If it doesn't happen, hey, we said this, right? The only thing I think with respect to China, a bit different, I thought, was Volkswagen was very vocal about their partnership with Gotion, right? Gotion helped with their gigafactory in Salzgitter in Germany. Mm-hmm. But Mercedes, while they're planning to build 8 gigas, I felt a bit surprising that they didn't mention their cooperation with Farasis, the Chinese cell manufacturer based in Jiangxi province.
Right.
I don't know if you heard they reached a strategic collaboration deal a year ago, but they ran into some quality issues, I think, in the benchmarking stage. Mm-hmm. So they were hesitant to talk about, some of the cell partners they were going to work with. But at least we know that, battery packs, they're already assembled in China. Cell manufacturing, I'm sure there will be a factory there close to Beijing, But I thought that was one of the interesting things that they weren't as clear as Volkswagen. And another interesting thing is Geely, the owner of Mercedes or Daimler, also has a sort of a joint venture with Farasis. So somehow, these are intertwined.
They could be backing the wrong horse if Farasis can't get in front of some of these quality issues. But it should also be mentioned that we are talking about Volkswagen brand, but with Diess, so we're talking about Volkswagen brand generally speaking, but with Diess, he needs to look at 9 brands or 8 brands and create a battery and supply strategy for the entire company, as opposed to Daimler and Mercedes, which they have commercial trucking, but they have 2. So they have Smart and they have Mercedes as the private passenger vehicle. So they're a lot simpler when it comes to creating strategies to satisfy the different brands in their stable. So I think you'll see Mercedes probably execute a bit faster than a Volkswagen Group. The one thing that I wanted to highlight that I read just now, which is actually pretty surprising, was that Olaf mentioned that, Olaf, he mentioned that they're going to try to transition out of dealerships wherever possible, which should have been red flags for a lot of dealerships in the places where there's not protections for sales or restricting sales direct to the consumer from the automaker. So the United States, there are some really onerous dealership laws that will force them to keep on selling through the dealership for quite some time. Tesla has avoided that. Rivian's tried to avoid that. But, we had talked about this before. If you don't sell through a dealer in Michigan, in Texas, they won't deliver your car in that state. So you got to go pick it up in another state. So I think that he actually mentioned that in the update is pretty telling, because the dealerships are trying to transition themselves. And right now, all the news is pricing has gone so high for vehicles because supply is low. So the dealerships are making a ton of money. But that's a short-term pop. But there's still an existential threat to the dealerships if these brands decide to follow suit with the Tesla, with the Rivian, with the Volkswagen, and now with the Mercedes, trying to bring the sales And we can say sales, but they're trying to increase customer engagement effectively, right? Because once they start selling more services, the dealerships become a bit less relevant and they want that direct connection with the consumer. So I thought that stood out to me. To your point, everything else was pretty much table stakes, right? GM has said that they're phasing out. Ford said they're phasing out. Volkswagen effectively said they're phasing out. So this is just, everybody's doing it. So they just followed suit. And they kind of had to because the European Commission forced their hand. So,
yeah, this is exactly the same issue that Volkswagen is facing in China and probably elsewhere as they adapt to the. I will quote Wallenstein that he said, "You were still learning, adopting this agency model when you have 2,000 dealers and when you still have this legacy dealership model with the ICE cars." So yeah, this is a learning experience, balancing the interests, right? At the same time,
that in order for them to, because you had also mentioned to me privately that they're still targeting 80 to 100,000 in sales by the end of 2021. They can't do that with a direct to consumer model. They need their dealerships to get that done. So
yeah, true. But at least, things are looking up. So they expect 6,000 ID sales in July, which is double what they sold in June, which was about like 2,900. And based on their first half, they revealed some numbers. So in the first half of 2021, group sales, BEV sales in China was just a bit over 18,000 units, which is 1% of their group overall vehicle sales in China. And quarterly sales was about 6,000 units in Q1, 12,000 in Q2. So I imagine they should easily, if they expect 80,000 to 100,000, they should easily double sequentially every quarter from here on out.
Right.
So Q3 would double Q2 and Q4 would double Q3. So they will reach that goal. And it seems that the ID6 is getting some nice traction. So, yeah, I think that they're out of that initial phase of underperformance and stumbling out of the gate. It's catching up. So, being a Volkswagen stan, right? So, it's good.
Yes. So here's my take, Lei. I want to see average selling price. I want to see margins, because if they're going to get to that 80 to 100, I believe that they're going to have to incentivize the customer in some way. Now, they probably won't reduce the MSRP because that'll make them lose face, but they'll probably incentivize them some other way. So,
well, with the latest ID6 Cross, they're giving 1 year free charging on the CAM's charging network. So that's one way to do it. Yes.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't hit the vehicle pricing. So the average selling price should still be pretty healthy. But if we can agree from an accounting and finance standpoint, it's the same pair of pants, just different pockets. Their margins might get squeezed a little bit, or at least, on the services side, they might not see that revenue that they thought they were going to see at the beginning of the year. So what do you think about the move by Volvo to buy out Geely?
I thought it was way overdue. Way overdue. Because Volvo cars, unlike other foreign automakers, is unique in the sense that it's been 100% owned by Geely for 11 years now, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when they set up these operations, by the way, Volvo cars produce at 2 plants. One is owned by Geely in Chengdu. So they're not going to be, so this operations, this latest change is not involving that plant, but the other plant is in
Heilongjiang,
yeah, Daqing, where they export the S90s to Europe. So when Volvo cars, after Geely acquired Volvo cars and set up the joint venture operations, Geely still had to abide by the 50-50 rule. So even though I own Volvo cars, I still need to set up a joint venture with somebody that I own. So this was something that Li Shufu, complained about. right? And
Hmm.
when, the 50-50 rule is gone forever by the end of next year, that was already announced. So with BMW having, increased their stake in their joint venture to 75% 3 years ago, with
Yeah.
Tesla,
Hmm.
doing Wolfie. Hyundai, by the way, also operates a 100% owned commercial vehicle operation in China. So now it's Volvo's car's turn, and eventually, I think brands or companies like Daimler, Mercedes, where the Chinese partner are not as strong,
Right.
expect to
Chang'an.
see these happening more where the foreign automakers take more share in the joint ventures. But
Right.
having said that, for the Chinese industry, auto industry, it's not something to be scared or because you already have these players, NIO, XPeng, BYDs, they can compete head on with the joint ventures, with the foreign brand. So, let
Hmm.
them take over the shares. At the end of the day, we're going to compete on products and right. So I think this is a natural way for the industry sort of opening up more. But at the same
Yeah.
time,
It's
it doesn't mean I get control, I get leverage, I'm going to win. It doesn't mean that, right?
Yeah, this is
That's
generally
my
just
take.
an indication. It's just an indication of, to your point, a maturing market. And I remember 8, 9 years ago, I won't say everybody, people thought that Volvo was going to replace Audi as like the official government vehicle, right? Because now it's a Chinese owned brand, but that never really happened either. But with that being said, without Geely's help, Volvo wouldn't have the XC90. They wouldn't have the S90. These are beautiful cars, and they sell really well in China. And I think Volvo has had their best sales years over the last few years. Now, will this affect their sales in China because now that they're not quote unquote a Chinese owned brand? I don't think so, but they have their own challenges because hundreds of thousands of sales a year is a lot different than millions. And so I know that they have ambitions to get into the millions of vehicles a year, but if the Polestar is struggling as much as it is, that transition over to EVs for Volvo seems like it's going to be pretty challenging. Just like every other foreign maker who's traditionally known as an ICE manufacturer. So,
And for Volvo, by the way, they're announcing their Q2 earnings tomorrow or today, your time. On the books, it'll look better, right? Because they have full
yeah,
control rather than kind of the equity method that most of these, Volkswagen and Daimler that they use on the books. And also, I think this happened a couple of days or maybe a few days after Volvo and Geely set up that Oral Bay powertrain joint
sure.
venture, right?
Hmm.
So I think strategically, there's still the possibility of kind of a, I don't know, IPO or kind of as a standalone, right?
Yeah.
Volvo cars is still being talked about. There were some rumors, over the last few years on where they would IPO, and
One,
so I
one,
think they're
one
setting
other
themselves.
point. One other point that's notable is that I don't believe that there were any of the cost advantages that were originally forecasted that were actually conceived. And so separating from Geely should not actually be that painful from a cost saving standpoint, because I don't think Geely and Volvo ever got to the point where they're sharing a lot of common parts for their vehicles or engineering costs. So, I don't know, maybe the fixed cost was a little bit cheaper under the Geely holding company, but I don't
Right.
believe manufacturing costs are going to be significantly different.
Yeah, I mean, Geely has already benefited tremendously from the acquisition of Volvo cars, and in a sense, Geely, if you look at when they launched the Xingyue L, their big, large
Mm,
SUV, Li Shufu came out. He never comes out on product launches, and it seems that Geely as a brand is really sort of becoming China's Volvo already. So even having Volvo be a bit independent and kind of a bit far away from Geely, maybe that's what they want, though it's still 100% owned by the holding group. But,
Right.
Geely's established itself as a brand with Lynk & Co., with the Zeekr, right? Zeekr is probably the Volvo for Geely, internally,
Hmm.
or even higher. So yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if Volvo Cars sort of is in a position as similar to Porsche, what Porsche is doing, right? Rumors
Hmm.
out there, IPOing. Yeah. So, but it's, this is becoming more natural where, foreign partners are taking over joint ventures. There's more
Yeah, I don't.
it's just the
I think
natural.
I think we'll see more of that. But
Yeah.
let's the final
Speaking
subject
of
will be.
IPOs, right?
Yeah, I know you had some stories about Yueting Jia, who is the
Yeah.
founder of Leisure, and he's also the founder of Faraday Future. And he has had a huge soap opera. We bring up Faraday Future because they IPO'd or reverse merged into a SPAC last night, and now they're a public company. They raised $1 billion. So maybe you can tell us about Jia Yueting in his old days.
If a cat had 9 lives, YT Jia probably had 900 million lives.
Oh man!
Because
Oh
this guy just never goes away, right? I mean, the way he's been sued, the way he's having his finances frozen, he can't go back to China, right? There's a famous, I don't know if you know this or not, there's a nickname called I'm coming back next week, YT Jia.
I did not know that.
下周回国贾跃亭. Actually, the translation should be coming back to China next week, YT Jia.
Oh man! So
because he left China 4 years ago. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the right way is he ran away. From
yeah,
his troubles.
he left
Yeah,
Leisure a freaking mess.
yeah, and this is I think it's the things that he's gone through are just, I'll tell you, in the early days, I think at the end of 2014, when he announced this whole SEE, which is super electronic ecosystem, hence the LaCie brand, smart EV brand from the LaTV, right?
And
That
yeah,
was, back in the 2013 and 2014, we were in Beijing.
yeah,
Remember the haze, how bad they were
yeah,
during the winter times.
yep.
Over 500 in AQI numbers all the time, right? So he sent a Weibo saying that he wants to do something, and then he started the LaCie and hiring people. And
Yes.
I remember in 2014 and 15 attending quite a few events. One of the events was held at the Le TV Center, which is now the Cadillac Arena in western part of Beijing. So
for Lao Beijing, really quickly, for Lao Beijing, it's called Wukesong. So it's on the west side, and that's where they play basketball. So it's a basketball arena, or it's a sports
arena. The Cadillac Arena is where NIO had their first NIO Day in 2017. Before that, it was the Le TV Arena, right? They sponsored it, and they held events there.
And we should mention Le was his thing, right? It was Le Echo, Le TV, Le Sports.
Yeah. Well, Le TV was kind of the Netflix of China or something was billed as.
Yes.
And so one event, they also did smartphones, by the way. They just gave every press attending a free phone back in the days.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was ambitious plans.
Their headquarters was right on Fourth Ring Road, right? And that's gone now. And to add to his persona non grata for China, his wife and his son are in China, I believe. And
I don't know, but I mean, yeah. But over the years, if you look at the executives that he's hired to run, some of the companies and the C. So Ding Lei, right, who is the founder, chairman, CEO of Human Horizons, which makes the hi-fi brand Hi-Fi X.
Mm-hmm.
He used to be the vice chairman of LeC. He was hired in 2015 after serving as a deputy district mayor in Shanghai, right? And the Hi-Fi X, if you look at that model, it highly resembles the FF91. So I'm not sure
The
whether
silhouette.
there's any connection. Yeah. And Carsten Breitfeld, the current CEO of Faraday Future, was the co-founder and president of Byton, whom I've interviewed many times. And Faraday Future is still 20% owned by Evergrande Auto, which, by the way, has Daniel Kirchert, the other co-founder and CEO, former CEO of Byton, as their current EVP. So if you look at this web, tangled web, and somehow they're related, and it's a small circle, industry circle, and how this ended up being like this. And it's been 7 years, and we're still 12 months away from actually a production vehicle. And I remember, the reason why I say it's deja vu is I remember the few times I interviewed Karsten and as well as Daniel, the question that would always come up is, are you on schedule with your production of the M-Byte? And every time they would say yes. And every time, Karsten, a few times, he told me, coming out from BMW, we have a strict schedule of, we have this, right, SOP schedule, a 10 from 0, from the Germans, 0 is SOP, 10 is from the product initiation or idea phase. We count backwards. Right now, we're at 6. A few months later, we're at 5, 4, but it never got to 0, right? So
for those who don't know, SOP stands for start of production.
So the big question is, like Evergrande, we still don't have a production vehicle yet, and it's been how many years?
Byton was same formed car.
Byton was formed in 2016, right? And then
2014?
Never got anywhere. So still a lot of question marks.
Byton has its own challenges, right? I think they are not able to pay their bills, so that doesn't look like they're going to come to be able to produce a vehicle unless Foxconn bails them out. And we also know that $1 billion to get a vehicle to market or production is not a lot of money. So they're going to be tapping the capital markets again, Faraday Future, that is, very soon. I think their first batch of vehicles, the FF91 Futurist Alliance,
there's two,
the 300.
Yeah,
right?
There's two versions, the Futurist version and the Alliance, which is like the first edition, sort of, right? So but it was interesting if you saw the live stream where YT was talking about the positioning of the FF91 in his heavy Shanxi accent, English accent, Shanxi accent, speaking English. He said it will be at the top of the pyramid, so above the ultra luxury brands of Rolls-Royce, Bentley. That was that was crazy.
You gotta love his ambition. Yeah,
you sent me an article on South China Morning Post about Zhuhai, right? The local government couldn't get one of their investment through because of foreign exchange requirements. I guess I think it was
$175 million.
$5 million. And Zhuhai was one of the localities for Chinese production eventually. And the local government was trying to be an investor, but that didn't go through. So,
you correct me if I'm wrong, but another dimension of this was in order for Faraday to get out from under bankruptcy with the debtors, Jia Yueting had to sell out of his entire position of the company. And so supposedly he doesn't own much of the company anymore. But I was told that if you look at the management team, there's a younger vice president who's the head of corporate finance. That's his nephew. And so there's still some ownership within the family. But just reading the news wire the software that is going to be needed to create this ecosystem that he wants to roll out, it's going to be a nightmare for them. So again, very ambitious, 7 years. They got here with the numerous challenges. I don't think he's going to be able to come back to China for a long time. And he left a terrible wake in his path with his other company that basically went out of business because they couldn't pay its bills. He couldn't pay its bills. So Lusher, that company is no more effectively. So we're at 9:30. Lei, you want to see if anybody has any questions or comments about what we've talked about or anything else that they'd like to talk about?
Sure.
Please raise your hand and we'll bring you up to the stage.
I'll just add a little bit on the product wise. I was at CES in 2020, right before the pandemic, and I test rode the FF91, and I'll tell you this, it's, they have this zero gravity seating in the back, which you can recline pretty much all the way. And the bunch of screens, I think there's like a dozen screens inside the car. Automatic opening doors. It's, how do I describe it? Maybe it's a much more extreme version of the P5 where you can lie down and watch movies, right? The sleep mode. It's just some of the features are really extreme, I thought, and
it's a massive car. It's a big.
It's a massive car. It's a big car. I felt like a school bus riding in it.
And
so yeah,
I am not in the majority, but I actually think it looks pretty cool. So most of my friends, I don't know what you think of it, but I actually like it, like the shape, but it's a massive car. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.